Welcome to the May 19th Murfreesboro City Council meeting. If you'll bow your heads with me, we'll start our meeting in prayer. Father, I thank you for this day and this chance that we get to come and we get to celebrate the city that we live in. We get to celebrate our residents. Lord, we have several members in our city family that we want to lift up that are dealing with different illnesses, and we want to just pray that your spirit will be with them. Lord, I thank you so much for the positions that we've been put in, for the families that we have and the families we get to represent. Be with us and bless us. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, with indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I want to go ahead and get this over with before we start. Councilman Shacklett's baseball team beat our baseball team 12-10, and there were some really bad calls that the umpire made. So, right,
The city hired those umpires.
all right. You have the consent agenda in front of you. You have several items before you.
Move for approval.
Second. Motion is second. Ms. Wright?
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklett.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. You have the meetings of 2 minutes in front of you, May 5th, 2016 special meeting, and also the May 5th, 2016 regular meeting. Are there any additions or deletions to the minutes?
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright, call the roll.
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklett.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. We'll move into third readings. We'll consider for passage on third and final reading ordinance 16OZ09 to zone approximately 16.5 acres as planned residential development PRD district and rezone approximately 16.5 acres as planned residential development district along West Thompson Lane, 2015-431.
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright?
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklett.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
We'll move into our last third reading. Consider for passage on third and final reading ordinance 16OZ13 to zone an area along Blackman Road and Florence Road as planned residential development PRD district, Shelton Springs, 2016-406.
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion is second.
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklett.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. We'll move into new business and we'll consider recommendations of the city engineer regarding property acquisition for Lytle Street Phase 2. Mr. Griffith.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the City Council. I do have for you tonight one item. It's to begin the property acquisition for Phase 2 of our Lytle Street project. Weiser Consultants has determined the amount of right-of-way and or easements required for the construction of improvements to Lytle Street. These properties are primarily to the eastern portion, closer to to where the actual judicial building and parking garage will be located at. There's some properties that will be has small impacts to them, mostly small right-of-way takes and some construction easement. For the properties of the appraisals that we've received and approved, City staff proposes to purchase the right-of-way easements from the owners as outlined in the following procedure. The owner will be offered by letter, which a copy is attached, the values for their affected properties, improvements and any damages, plus an additional 10%. Included with the letter will be a copy of the appraisal for the owner's review. The property owner will be asked for a response within 2 weeks. If they can substantiate that the appraisal was factually wrong, such as errors in area taken, then a review value based on the appraised value plus square foot would then be determined. If the offer is not acceptable to the property owner, the legal department would file condemnation with actual value of the taken being deposited into court. The right-of-way and easements will be acquired with the most recent bond issue. And again, this only includes 6 of the 14 properties that are impacted. We expect the remaining appraisals to be coming over the next 60 days. With that, I asked approval of the acquisition of the right-of-way and easements, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Chris, with the current plans and stuff that we presented the property owners, can you give me a percentage of how much effect we're having on parking in the area? Are we generating more parking, less parking, trying to keep it exactly the same? How's it affecting them?
Originally, we were having a fairly significant impact on the parking. By our numbers, we were in reduction to it as far as the actual on-street parking. There were 56 private spaces that were impacted. We had reduced that to 30 spaces after our initial plans review. We went back to the property owners, talked with them, asked them, trying to get feedback from them on the project. Got really good information from them. Maybe they could use less sidewalk space. Even looked at the bike lanes that are part of the project. Taking that information, we were able to increase the number of parking places to 47, and again, those will be all public spaces. So it's really where where a space may not be available in front of your building, but maybe next door. And so all that would be, whereas before it would be a private space that would only serve that business. And then, of course, we're adding the parking garage, which we think will be a valuable asset to the area as well. So, long way of answering your question. We did reduce the spaces from 56 to 47. We've met with a lot of the property owners again. They really appreciated the increase, and they wish they had as many as they had before, but they seem very satisfied with it.
Right. I understand the importance of them having parking for their customers, and I know that a few of the businesses through there have unique situations in the fact of the delivery trucks and stuff that come in there, and I just hope we continue, and I'm sure we will continue to work with them to provide the best ability for them to maintain their businesses and keep them as cooperative as possible, or operative as possible, and still go with what we're intending of improving the area and the nature and the environment, the traffic flow and everything as well. So I know it's not an easy job, but I appreciate you working with them. I was talking to one of the business owners the other day, and he was upset initially, and then by the time I got over there to him, he'd got a new set of plans, and he was actually pretty happy with it. So I appreciate the effort and all the work you're putting into it.
Thank you, sir.
Griffith, are we with what we're doing tonight? Is this will that kind of finalize the plans, or are you still kind of working on those, or?
No, we're still working on them. Matter of fact, I just met with the engineer today about some changes. It won't really be a change that we have to make initially, but just a curb line with one of the businesses. He had mentioned that, hey, my delivery truck comes here, can we change the curb line? And
So we still have the capability to go.
Absolutely, and still looking at limiting some of the access on one of the side streets there, just as Mr. Smotherman had mentioned, to help with deliveries from the side streets that may not be used as much. So now this is really just so we can move forward with the property that's really near the judicial building and the parking garage as well, just in those 2 blocks.
Any questions?
Any more questions?
Go ahead.
I'll move for approval.
Second.
Motion and second. Ms. Wright?
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman. Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Griffith. Consider recommendations of the Planning Commission consider recommendations of the Planning Commission and schedule public hearings to consider a PUD amendment along Memorial Boulevard, Haynes Haven Lane, PCD amendment along West Northfield Boulevard, Sulphur Springs Road, annexation plan of services for an annexation of an area located along New Salem Highway, and a zoning application along New Salem Highway, Commercial Fringe, RM12, and RZ simultaneous with annexation. Mr. Plumlee.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. During its regular meeting on May 4th, 2016, the Planning Commission conducted public hearings on the following matters, and after the public hearings, the Planning Commission discussed the matters and then took action to recommend their approval. The first one is a zoning application for approximately 22.5 acres located along Memorial Boulevard and Haynes Haven Lane to amend the PUD. NHC is the applicant. The second one is a zoning application for approximately 5.6 acres located along West Northfield Boulevard and Sulphur Springs Road to amend the PCD. Tarver Properties, Inc. applicant. The third is an annexation plan of services and annexation petition for approximately 76 acres located along New Salem Highway. William and Carolyn Waite are the applicants. And the final one is a zoning application for the same property, approximately 74 acres, located along New Salem Highway to be zoned CF, approximately 26.1 acres, RM12, approximately 23.1 acres, and RZ, approximately 25 acres, simultaneous with annexation. Once again, William and Caroline Waite are the applicants. It is the recommendation of the Planning Commission that the City Council schedule public hearings on these four matters. Be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Tyndall.
Mayor, the two PUD amendments, we'd like to recommend June 16th for public hearing, and the annexation zoning for June the 23rd.
Okay. So we have one on June 16th and one on June 23rd. Two on the 16th, one on the 23rd.
Two on the
Two on
16th
each
and
of
two on
them,
the
yeah.
23rd.
Yeah. That's what I said. That's what I meant to say. So two on the 16th and two on the 23rd.
Yes, sir.
Got you.
Move for approval. Accept their recommendations.
Second.
Motion is second. Mr. Wright, call the roll, please.
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Plumlee. Consider recommendations of the Assistant City Attorney, release of a purchase agreement and letter of intent with Mark Pirtle Gateway LLC.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. Back in 2006, Mark Pirtle stepped forward and purchased a number of lots in the Gateway area, planning mostly for office space. There was also some plan for perhaps a high-end restaurant or bank space up along the road. The interior spaces were generally intended for offices. Mr. Pirtle has built several offices in there. He has sold one or two of his parcels in the past to others who have built something, and he now has a proposal to sell a lot to a live hospice for the construction of a hospice facility on a lot that is adjacent to the medical clinic. Our process on selling Gateway land, the city-owned Gateway land, especially which this was, is rigorous, and we tie it up pretty strongly with letters of intent and purchase options and a variety of default provisions that give the city more rights than probably would normally be had in a arm's length commercial transaction. Because of that, the purchaser of this land, purchaser for live hospice, very appropriately wants to make sure that the city doesn't have some strings left and that there could be something that would interfere with their use and full title to and use and occupancy of the property, and have asked us for essentially a release of all our rights under the letter of intent and the purchase contract. We have done substantially the same thing in a prior transaction when Mr. Pirtle sold property. I believe it would be appropriate for us again. The project has been through the DRC, Design Review Committee. It has also been been given final approval by the Planning Commission, and they're ready to move forward. I anticipate they will want to close on purchasing the property in the next few days and be underway shortly. Happy to answer any questions. This has no impact on the city financially. It is to essentially to clear up title for the buyers. So we're asking council to approve this release and authorize the mayor to sign it and allow then the transaction to go forward.
The design review committee has already reviewed what is going to be built, or?
Correct. Correct.
Not final, with no initial review.
But this would release them from any more review or any more consideration, is that?
They would be required to do what they're saying they're going to do. If they wanted to change something of their building elevations or their site plan, they would have to come back to building elevation. Well, anything like that would have to come back to both Planning Commission and DRC for review.
Okay. I move we approve.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright?
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. Item 8, continued discussions regarding Murfreesboro Electric Department. Mr. Lyons had put this on the agenda, but we received a letter today that was delivered to City Hall, and so I want to read that. It's from Chris Jones at Middle Tennessee Electric. Dear Mayor McFarland and City Council, Middle Tennessee Electric's Board of Directors formally and respectfully withdraws our cooperative's offer to purchase the Murfreesboro Electric Department. We are taking this step to further clarify Murfreesboro City Council's recent action on the matter. And in light of our great respect for the employees, staff, and board of the Murfreesboro Electric Department, we are honored the City of Murfreesboro gave consideration to the idea of bringing our two great utilities together. Middle Tennessee Electric will remain a dependable corporate and community citizen of the City of Murfreesboro, and we will continue to proudly serve those within the city who are members of our cooperative. We look forward to a future of working together with the City and MED. Sincerely, Chris Jones, President and CEO of the Middle Tennessee Electric Membership Corporation. So, I'm not sure what there's to discuss, but this is, and I'll give this to Ms. Michoto so it can be part of the minutes. Any discussion?
Pretty much settles that, right? That means basically the memorandum's done. There's no offer, right? I mean, that's what that's saying. I try to listen along. Something came up last week that I've been thinking about since then. Eddie talked about kind of some of the structural issues, or what that looks like. I'm not sure I'm real clear on this. They also talked about, the appraiser talked about some things about ownership. And can you guys tell me how is the electric department owned and run? Who has the risk? Some of that stuff while they were talking about last week, my wheels were spinning, and I'm like, how did the power board become the power board, and why? Does anybody have any history on that? I'm just sort of piggybacking on.
I can give you a real quick history on that, if you'd like. The city, I guess we should start with the fact the city, in its charter in 1933, was given the authority in the Private Act to purchase electrical systems, electrical distribution, electrical lighting, electrical systems. Shortly thereafter, in I think it was 1935, 36, TVA came into Tennessee, started negotiating, buying up electrical utilities. And I'm hoping I might get this wrong because the experts are sitting out here. So if I get the history wrong, I guess I'll stand corrected. But began negotiating to buy up utilities and have them sold to either cooperative organizations or to municipalities. And so the city entered into an agreement in 1939. After all the negotiations were completed in 1939 to buy the what was, I think, the Tennessee Electric Company, something along those lines, at least the portion of it that served inside the city. And that became the Board of Public Utilities, is what it was called at the time, for the city. And the city ran that until 1947, when the council decided at that point in time to create a power board, a governing body for the electrical department. The city's always owned the electrical department. It is a department of the city. It doesn't have any separate legal existence apart from the city. Since 1943, when the Power Board was created, that board has essentially been the governing board for Murfreesboro Electric Department. That's the history, in short.
So, all right, the question I had, and this was going to be a question that I had relative to Middle Tennessee Electric, I mean, as far as kind of how this whole thing was happening. As it relates to risk, if something happens with Murfreesboro Electric, just like any other department, then if a decision is made at Murfreesboro Electric and there is some, something that creates risk for the city that occurs from that, does that all stay? Is it separate inside that department, or does it flow through to the city?
Councilman, there's lots of different kinds of risk, and I'd probably defer to PD as far as the insurance coverage that MED carries. But generally speaking, the electric department has run as an enterprise fund, to use a municipal term. It's run on its own. It's financed through its own. The city has issued all of its debt financing in the city's name. Those have all been revenue bonds. So that means we're ultimately responsible for it? Well, the revenue from the electric department is responsible. So the city's it's not a general obligation of the city. The city's credit is used to issue those, but it's based on the revenue of the electric department. That's what repays the debt.
But as owner, do we ultimately have some responsibility for the actions of what takes place at the electric department?
I think the short answer would be yes. I guess it would depend on what level of consideration is given to that, because the electric department would be the first step.
Right.
They have
and their insurance, where their status would probably cover were there an incident.
And I apologize because I've asked before and I can't remember the questions whether the electric department carries its own coverage or if we insure it. Yeah, I'm being told yes, they do. They carry their own insurance coverage. So now we would, if they exceeded their coverage, and I'm sure they carry a lot of coverage, so they're probably fine. But at some point, if some disaster happened, they exceeded it, then the city would be ultimately responsible because it is a department of the city.
Any other questions?
No questions, but a comment.
No.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. You start.
Just a comment. As you all have known, I've stayed out of this, But this particular conversation came up a little bit before I retired from Middle Tennessee Electric, so I'm well aware of what was going on, and chose to not comment. The biggest thing I get out of that letter or that response from Mr. Jones, who's a great guy, is that these employees need some relief. They've been sitting with us. I was a district manager for 13 years, ran 3 offices for Middle Tennessee Electric, worked there for 33 years. There is no disrespect for MED, and PD knows that there's no better company to work for than Middle Tennessee Electric. Middle Tennessee Electric serves over 200,000 people. We serve all of Williamson County, all of Wilson County, all of Cannon County, and all of Rutherford County, except for the city of Murfreesboro. The operations, I've listened to a lot of stuff and comments being said. Jack Whitaker, he used to work for Middle Tennessee Electric before I got there. I think he'll say that there's no better place. Our control center, our call center, our AMI installations, all will be second to none. So as far as I was concerned, the operations wouldn't have changed at all. I worked 3 tornadoes and 3 ice storms in my 33 years. We have all the resources, or Milton's left all the resources you would need and then some. So, as a company, our reputation is, you can't beat it. Can't beat it. Anybody that dealt with us know how we operate. Ms. Scales Harris made a comment about this issue is coming for the council. In my 18 years of being on this council, it's never coming for the council. It never got out of Roger Haley's office. I know for a fact James O. Baker, the late James O. Baker, they've always addressed the citizen, hey, are y'all interested in us working together and making this happen? Frank Jennings, one of my bosses, I had all 3 of them, did the same thing, and I was involved in that. And then Chris Jones, he got farther than any of them got, because it never made it out of Roger Haley's office. And I know why. And that's okay. So I guess the biggest thing I can say, and that's all I'm going to say about this thing, is thank God for the employees of MED that now y'all got some relief. Go on and do what you've been doing. It's excellent that you always have. I know most of you have dealt with you for as long as I've been at MED. So I hope that you all as employees can finally have some relief. Because it's all about you.
Well, and I think you really hit it that I will say with Mr. Lyons, and as a council member, there's not one person that should have control over whether a decision comes to be discussed or not. And so I will tell you, if there's a decision that comes up that needs to be discussed, I don't think Mr. Lyons is going to be the type to say, no, it stops here. He's going to let the council make a decision. Now, some people may get mad with that. To be honest with you, I'm very disappointed with how some people have acted during this process. I think it's been concerning. But to be able to, for the public to be able to feel like that they have leaders who are open and transparent, I will say with Mr. Jones, and I think Mr. Lyons would say this, Mr. Jones has not contacted us since this process has been going on. I know he hasn't contacted me, so he's not been involved in trying to lobby or sway or say things that shouldn't have been said, and I think that says a lot about that individual. So we're blessed in this community that we have 3 great utility companies, because I want to throw Murfreesboro Water and Sewer in there. And that's really where I see MED from sitting on the power board. I look at the information. I don't have the budget that I have here, the water and sewer budget. You guys may have that in front of you. But, I think that when I talk about operational improvements, Murfreesboro Water and Sewer is a $50 million company, and this is the information that the City Council gets on summary, revenue, expense, appendix, historical data, budget detail, forecasting, planning for what's coming up in CIP improvements. And I think you look at the way that organization is run, and I think that's a credit that we have 3 great utilities in Murfreesboro, and it's never because it's from a lack of information. So I think we've learned several different things through this process, and I'm sure we'll learn more in years to come. But I want to finish say I will make the commitment to the other council members. Doug's not here, but there won't be a decision that will come to me that I'm not going to bring to the council. It's not going to be a one-man decision, and if that makes some people mad, then so be it. But I think that's why we're here and why we're elected and we're not appointed. So.
And to follow up on you, I mean, after doing the valuation study, we're talking about a $250 million company here, and at or utility, and I think from our standpoint, is at least from my standpoint, I don't want to do anything that affects the benefits or the anything that's going on with the electric department today. But I do think that there should be a structure in place that gives everyone accountability to someone that the public can hold accountable. and that would be an elected official. And I think so, if we own the electric department, I think the electric department has the responsibility, just like the water department, Parks and Rec, and every other department, should be to report back to the elected officials and let us have some idea what is going on, because currently, and it's not that their board meetings are closed or not, but I don't serve on their board, and I don't serve on the water board either, but I still know what they're doing. And when I see people on the side of the street working with the water department, generally I can tell you what it is they're working on, because we've had a presentation to let us know that they're going to be working out on Church Street, and they're putting a force main in, and they're doing, I have no idea what a force main is, but I know they're putting one in. I have no idea what electricity looks like, but I would like to know when they're working on a project, so when people from the community say, Eddie, what are they working on out there? I can tell them there's a station or something going on, and I'm sure there's terminology for that I don't know now that I would know if there was a better relationship between what's currently the electric department and where I would like to see the electric department to be. So what I'm asking for truly is much better communication. And Craig, I'll ask you, what would be the procedure that should be done in order to improve that communication? How would the procedure be put into place?
Well, I can only answer that, I guess, from the outset, and then the steps from there would have to be with the manager of the department. But from the outset, the council could choose to restructure the way the Power Board is in effect right now. The Power Board is permissive. It doesn't need to be created as it is. The council can choose to create it differently. The Power Board could be composed similar to the way the Water and Sewer Board is composed at this point in time. So that's one alternative the council could certainly take. From a legal standpoint, that's the council's prerogative.
Can you explain the difference between the Water and Sewer Board and the existing Power Board?
The essence is the Water and Sewer Board is an advisory board at this point in time. So the Water and Sewer Board will accept information from the director and will take action and vote.
I'm on it.
Yeah, Councilmember Warshin's on it. And then that vote is a recommendation to council, and then that information is taken by the director and brought to the council, and council is the one that makes the final decision on what happens. At this point in time, the Power Board is composed of as a governing board that makes the decision, and there is no requirement that it be brought back to council.
And they're all appointed?
They are appointed by the city manager at this point in time, in consultation with council, I believe is the way the ordinance is written.
City manager.
I tried to give that up.
So, on my question earlier, I had already written down, thinking history-wise, going back to 1947 may be tough, but maybe Rob probably may be better suited for this. But why is it different? Why is it set up different? Is there some reason why they should be set up this way when every other board is set up a different way?
I can't tell you precisely. I'll give you somewhat of a speculation, is that the legislature did create a separate act for electric plants, municipal electric plants. And under that law, it dictates how certain things are to take place. For example, the composition of a board. If the city, in our case, a city with a city manager, which is really the touch point on whether they need to follow the act or not, but if they choose to follow that particular act, it dictates how that board is to be created and who's going to be on the board. So I think what we did in 1943, what council did in 1943, is to create a board under that Power Act and follow those tenets. And it sort of, at that point in time, seemed to separate things off because it was a governing board that was given the authority to make decisions at that point in time under that state law. Now, we didn't buy the electric utility under that law. We bought it because we had separate authority under our charter to buy electrical utility. And that's the authority that we exercised when we bought it in 1939. But in 1943, when the Power Board was created, the council at that time made a decision, and it could have made another decision. It wasn't required by state law to make that decision, but it made a decision to create the Power Board in that effect. That may be a long way of saying you can choose something different at this point if you choose to do that, because it is a permissive statute. You can choose to back off the statute and create the Power Board similar to what the board is for the water and sewer, an advisory board, doing much the same things that they do now, only in an advisory capacity, and then have the information come to council. That's one option.
So what we're saying is that the city still owns, MED, and they're not operating as a separate entity, or the city does own MED and they are operating. Which one are we saying?
The second one. The second one.
Okay, so we're saying that the city owns MED, but they're just a separate entity right now, right?
Correct.
Okay, then, and you were talking about the water board, so who governs the MED board?
Council. It comes back to council, any recommendation from their board.
No.
You want the water board or the
He's saying
MED?
MED. No, I said like the water.
Oh, okay.
I'm just confused. I said who?
Right now, the MUD board has the authority to make decisions. And it needn't come back to council to have those decisions either ratified or made by the council. The Water and Sewer Board does not make decisions. It issues advice, and those decisions then come to council to be made.
So is that a change in charter that would be required, or it's just, so you said it was what was the word you used?
Well, the state law permits the city to, it says we may create a board under the municipal electric plant law. We may create it. We don't have to create it. So it's permissive for a city like us, which has a city manager. And so that's the real difference, is that we can create a board, and we can create a board that's advisory, and we can do that because we have a charter that allows us to operate an electrical utility. So we can choose to do that, and we can choose to do that in a fashion that's very similar to what the municipal electric plant law does now. I mean, it wouldn't be a big change except for the advisory nature.
Does the council presently have the authority to change that relationship, or?
It does.
And would that be done through a resolution?
Well, because there's an ordinance in effect, I mean, because it's codified, and we're going to make sure that it's codified online so everybody can see it, but it is codified now, so my recommendation would be an ordinance. It would be an ordinance that.
So the difference would be, for example, we just spent 3 hours on going through budgeting, and right now that budget, the MED budget, does not come really to anyone within the city for approval. It
goes to the Power Board.
Okay.
So if it was an advisory board, like the water and sewer, you'll see the water and sewer.
Here's a question from an accountability standpoint, and I serve on the Power Board. How does the public? So it's a municipally owned, a publicly owned entity. The accountability, or really the only public voice, would be if the public went or wanted a copy of the budget. They go, because the meetings are not televised like these. So
it would be a public record, and they would get that.
But what I'm saying is, it's not like the water and sewer where it's a presentation that goes through. So we never see. The only time we really will see a budget is, I guess, when we're preparing our tax in lieu of payments, or is that how that works?
And that's not a real budget, but that is
just a number,
a formula.
And I guess, Shane, where I'm coming from is, if we were to see that budget, and most budgets get approved. I mean, I don't think we're looking to micromanage anybody's budget. But when we see that budget, if somebody in the public disagrees with what we're approving, we're held accountable. And on election day, if they say, you did something that caused my electric rates to go up, or you did something that had an effect on me personally because of where you put in a substation or something like that, they could hold somebody accountable. Under the current system, is there any accountability at all of the electric department to the ratepayers?
Or the citizens?
Yeah, the citizens.
Well, I guess it wouldn't be direct because you don't vote for the power board that's making the decisions. It would be indirect, I guess. They could come to the council.
Because Rob made the appointment?
Right. But we don't go to Rob, who would go back to the power board as far as an appointment would be concerned. So it's a two-step indirect process.
So I'm back still on the same question. I'm sorry. I'm just asking it 3 different ways. But are there any advantages? I mean, I'm back to this, why would they have done this in 1947 kind of thing? But what would be the advantages of having the board set up like it is now? Do we avoid any risk? Do we avoid, is there some advantage that I can grab a hold of here that is?
I probably am not the best person to answer that question. It looks to me as if it's more historic evolutionary process of what occurred in
60 years ago.
Yeah, in the 30s and 40s, and how things seem to develop would be my guess at looking at this as closely as I have.
Well, I'll say, as we're talking about this, I'll give y'all probably the non-political answer as we've gone through this, and and I'm probably closer to the situation because I'm the one who's been taking the arrows for even bringing this up. But I have, in my opinion, I think that every department in this city, and we've got 21 of them. Is that right, Mr. Lyons?
Yes, sir.
And every one of them present a budget to elected board of body. They're all governed by the city. I don't, in my opinion, think MED should be any different. I think that they should. I think that the general manager should answer to the city manager. I think that the power board should be appointed by the elected officials, not the city manager, who is not a. You tried to give that up 3 years ago, and by state law couldn't. So, I think you look at Murfreesboro Water and Sewer. You look at all of the departments that have been so successful in this city, and there wouldn't be anything that would change with MED. But I think that right now there's a disconnect between departments and MED, and I think this is a way to fix it. So as we talk about it, if you want my opinion. Now, that's probably going to make some more people mad, but they don't like me anyway. So I think that this is by far the best thing that would be for the power board would not change. It would be, they would do the exact same job. The only difference would be is there would be another layer of accountability that it would have to go to another set of eyes to look at it. So, and I think in this case that would probably be a good thing.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, the only thing that, and I agree to a great extent, looking at this, but the one thing I think the last few months have yielded is that we have a great department.
100% great.
And a valuable system that has served since the year of its inception, have served the citizens of our community extremely well. So, I would like to have a little bit more dialogue about, what specifically and how this functions and how we're going to improve it by what we're doing, before we actually do it.
Oh, yeah.
And it may be some efficiencies that, in other words, listen to the department and see what they would say would be a better way of handling it. I think some of the board, listening to them, I realize that they want to serve the community as well too, and if there's ways to make that system function better, I don't think it's a matter of them wanting to be unaccountable to the citizens, but before we drastically change something that's been instituted in our community for all these many years, I'd rather have a little bit more discussion.
And Bill, I think all the discussions, exactly what you're talking about is those are discussions, because I think we have a great power board. But I think there's some operational efficiencies when we're talking about saving taxpayer dollars. And I'll give you a few. For example, MED subcontracts, we voted at the last, I think it was the last board meeting, to subcontract on an hourly rate an HR person. So MED doesn't necessarily have an HR department. The city does. The risk management department, the city has a risk management department. Human resources, there's not a human resource department. So I think there's a lot of good things that you could show benefit to the employees that at the same time would be some operational efficiencies that would be to the taxpayer. So the accountability is not for, I don't necessarily think a control, but I think what we have to look at is long after we're gone is making sure that the controls and those procedures are in place and making sure that the employees are protected. And that's where I would say that I've had this conversation with our finance department about operational efficiencies on things that we could definitely look at. So I don't think it'd be anything on blowing up something that has worked so well. I think it would be an enhancement on something that could even benefit better.
So if we go that route, just making a change like that, that'll mean that the MED employees, no one's job is going to be lost, or they're going to lose their seniority, and they're not going to lose their benefits. We're just restructuring
The board,
the board.
really.
But the employees and
Really, it just means the board would have someone who would report to us on things like budget and rate increases and stuff that we see Darren up here for, or, Mr. Gore up here for now, is about all it essentially sounds like it amounts to. Is that right? When when I'll go back to this risk thing, I'm going to tell you right now, I don't know, if something happened at MED and somebody sued them over something, I'd be willing to bet anybody in here a quarter that they probably sue the city too, which means we had nothing to do with the decision and we're getting sued over it. That doesn't compute to me. And I whether or not we end up having to pay anything, maybe not, but maybe so. And I can't put those two things together in my mind as I'm sitting here thinking about it. Maybe y'all know I go that direction a lot as far as the risk piece of this, but that definitely spooks me a little bit. But I'm good with getting
Ron, or somebody that served on the Water and Sewer Board, what is the difference between serving on the board for the Water and Sewer and your understanding, or somebody's understanding of what serving on the electric board? What are the benefits? What are the responsibilities of those two? Or are they totally different? Are they? They're just totally different positions.
Well, I think
receiving totally different.
If you ask the majority of our boards, I don't think that they would consider themselves advisory, even though they're set up advisory in nature. But if you look at the airport board, we trust our boards that we really defer to. And the majority of the time when a board has a recommendation, 9 times out of 10, we take the recommendation of that board. But the only thing that they're focusing on is that one area. So I think that the only difference, and from what I've seen serving on the power board, once a decision's made on the power board, it stops at the power board.
How about this example? Something gets passed through the Planning Commission. It's over. If they're set up like the the power board, if the Planning Commission's set up like that, once it gets through Planning Commission, it doesn't come to us. And if we think, as one of the elected officials, that that's going to impact too many people in a way that we don't think is correct, we can alter the Planning Commission's advice to us, right? We don't have that capability in the power board. That's the difference. Is that right?
I think it really gives a second review on most decisions that are made, too, because, you're using the Planning Commission, for example. When we see something come through the Planning Commission, we don't feel like we're an advisory board to the council. We feel like we're making the best decision for what's best for the city. But at the same time, when it gets forwarded to the council, I think most all of us look at the vote and how the vote went. And if there was a person who was opposed to it on that board, then generally we contact them and find out, what was your concern? And why were you opposed to this? And so it's just a second review of it's almost like a Parks and Rec meeting when they come in and give us, it's just affirmation that, yes, we think you're doing the right thing, carry on, keep doing a good job. And that's kind of the way we handle most things. I mean, there's rarely ever that we get a recommendation from one of our boards that we actually decline and say, no, we're not going to do it. Sometimes we'll defer and send it back to the board and say, have you thought about this? But it's just a second level of review, I think.
You know, Bill, this is the way I would characterize it. Last week with the Power Board and the City Council, we talked about partnership. I think that was brought up a lot, partnership. And I think this is no different. You know, when we talked with Water and Sewer or Parks and Rec that now has a $13 million budget this year, it was more of a partnership of, this is what we're working on, this is how we're working on it, but all of those things have gone through the process before it gets here. So I think that's really, I don't think it's anything about changing delivery or changing really anything with the day-to-day operations, but I think it's given that extra layer of, for instance, I'll give you an example. You know, from a contractor standpoint, you know, when we do plan review, and the city does plan review for years, Murfreesboro Water and Sewer's there, the fire department's there, stormwater management's there, every department's around that table looking at something that comes in and they say, this is how this is going to affect that area. That currently doesn't happen with MED as far as being part of plan review. So I think really what you're looking at is more of a partnership on making sure that those decisions are made. So I think there's a lot of operational efficiencies that can make it benefit the taxpayers and the service providers and not affect one thing with an employee or anyone that's currently there. Now, will upper management have a little more accountability on having to answer to a city manager at budget time and those things? Sure, that will change. But as far as the majority of everything else, I don't foresee there would be one difference. So, anyway.
And structurally, from my perspective, I think Rob's got his plate full. I really hate adding anything else to Rob. I mean, as a filler between us being able to figure out really how we want to handle it as far as who we want to report to us, I think there is some uniqueness about utilities, whether it's water department or electric department. So I wish we had a utility director who would report to us and who would have an understanding of what both projects are doing so that we would get more of a coordinated perspective. And I think he would have his hands full trying to oversee the operations of both operations. I think it would be more than enough to keep a person busy and justify the position. But I do think there's some unique things about the electric department that, you know, whether, you know, it's the contracts that the employees are I'm not even going to go there. I think there are things that are unique about the electric department as well as the water department. And I know that the police department has risk. I know that the solid waste people have risk. But I think there's some unique things about going down in holes and climbing up on poles that makes that different than 90% of the jobs in the city. So I would ultimately like to see us to have someone who really has a good understanding, because if I were to ask Rob right now to explain to me how electricity works, I'm not sure what my answer would be. You
flip the switch.
Flip the switch, yeah. But I do think that there's probably somebody who should be overseeing this who reports to the council. I'm just not sure that my favorite pick would be Rob.
And I'm maybe the only one that's kind of I've been thinking in this way, but could we have somebody compile whatever the efficiencies, somebody write what you're talking about, some of the efficiencies that the mayor had mentioned, and then I'd like to look at some other municipalities that have electric departments and how they constitute their electric boards. Could somebody get us some idea as to, are we unique? Is this the only place that this anomaly of how a board operates independent of the city government, is that the only place that it does that, or is that a tradition in Tennessee because they were constituted at the same point that ours was? Look at some other municipalities that are operating electric systems and see if their board are independent of the governmental body. I'd like to hear that and see that, and then we could move forward with it. So.
Well, you got one right down the street in NEX. The cooperatives and everything outside of Davidson County, well, I don't say everything, but most outside of Davidson County is served by somebody else. But, NES is you can look at them and see how they function because they serve everybody. They serve Laverne.
Do they report to
one side of
council?
Laverne.
Do they report to council? Or do they operate?
What they do.
Well, that's the question. That's the question.
I don't have a clue, but if you will just...
Can we get that information?
Yes, sir.
Maybe to make an informed decision?
Yes, sir.
I mean, Franklin's got a utility, don't they? Don't they have their own electric department?
They just sold it. It's sold it. They sold theirs to him.
Okay, that's right, they did sell it to MED, yeah.
1973.
And Mayor, you were saying that, and you on the board, and as far as,
I got appointed to the board because Rob didn't want to appoint another council member, so he put the mayor on the board.
okay,
I remember that.
Yeah.
I remember, yeah. I think you were a little shocked, but so being on the board, as far as it, let me get my thoughts together here. I'm having a senior moment, let's see. Being on the board, it's not, you don't see a structural problem. It's just everybody coming under the same umbrella is what we want to do. I mean, well, that's what we're talking about.
No, I think the board members they're phenomenal board members.
Right. That's what I'm saying. It's not.
Yeah. It's been really hard for me to get used to making decisions that don't go any further than that board.
Mm-hmm.
That's been really tough because I like the accountability to go to the next step, and that means that everybody's checking that. So that's been my biggest issue. Because
So we said the board doesn't answer us, but do they answer to someone like TVA? If so,
sure.
In some ways.
Yeah.
so okay, so they answer to TVA, but then they can, in some ways, but we can.
TVA approves all rate structures.
Okay.
I think, Steve, get me right here, I know that the increase in the wages, y'all parallel TVA. Did y'all still do that? Okay.
No, I was just wondering. That's who they answer. I know they have to answer to somebody. I just wonder, was it TVA? That's why I was wondering.
They only answer the TVA on certain things.
Okay.
But the Power Board, they are the ultimate authority
Okay.
for MED in
see what
most
you're saying.
things. I mean, even a rate increase.
Operational stuff.
Yeah, they have to approve a rate increase, but TVA has to approve that, just like Middle Tennessee Electric. So TVA
Same thing
really,
with-
they don't have operational control of none of us, no utility. However, rate structure, physical capacities, some of those kind of things, you got to run it through them. They're the regulatory agency,
Right.
basically.
And even the board has the opportunity to decline a rate increase.
They do.
So,
They control
And
it.
did
so,
last.
I mean, yeah, the board did that
the
last year, so.
So I just pulled it up. I Googled it on NES. It says here that they've been structured the same way since 1939. Or it says since 1939, we have been committed to, no, okay, sorry. And then it goes to that's how long they've been around. And then it says they have electric power board, whose 5 members are appointed by the mayor, confirmed by the council to serve 5 years staggered without pay. So I wonder if ours get paid?
Yes.
Yep. So that would sound like that's a difference, but, well, let's find out. Let's find out. I thought I had it, but I didn't. I'm sorry.
What would you recommend, Mr. Tindall?
Well, the problem with finding comparable cities is you'd have to find one that had a private act charter. So they'd have to be in the same category as we are with respect to that. And the charter would have to have the authority to buy and operate an electrical system. And, they would have had to bought the electrical system not under the authority of the municipal electric plant law, but under their own authority like we did. And so you'd have to find some city that fit all those three categories in Tennessee that would be comparable to the situation here. So whether we can do that or not, I'm not
I think
sure.
this is the way we got to where we are.
Right.
But what I'd like to see today, what are other municipalities doing, and how do they function with their, with their boards? Where they, I think that because if we're thinking about making a change, we're making a change because of the current status of the way we're operating today. And if it's a move to something better that is operationally functional and it creates some efficiencies, or whatever it does, holds people accountable, whatever it does, whatever we're saying we're going to accomplish by making a change in how we're constituting our boards, then that may be functioning well and in another community that's comparable to us that has an electric system. And I wouldn't be so concerned about how they got there, but if they are now at the place that we want to go, what would it look like?
Sure.
They're at where we're saying we want to go, and that's the kind of thing I think would be helpful.
I guess the question is that information, and then is it something that you want to proceed with, at least looking at the idea of it operating like every other department, or is it something that I guess we're not calling for a motion, but
I would like to see a resolution written that would give us an idea of what direction we would have the opportunity to go.
Resolution or ordinance?
Or an ordinance, yes. And to give us an idea of what it would be that we're doing, because I'm not sure exactly what we're doing. I do have a good feel for what it is I want to see happen, because, again, I'm looking for efficiencies that I think the city has to offer the electric department that they're currently not taking advantage of, and I think there is accountability that the electric department currently does not have to the city, that I would like to see some accountability to someone who is an elected official rather than just an appointed official or an appointed board member. So having said that, I think I would just request that the legal department write up an ordinance that would have structure to it, and then we can vote on it whether we think it's a good thing or not a good thing once we know what it is we're voting on. It's hard to say if you're for something or against something until you see it written down as to, and then once we look at it, we can say, okay, what are the effects of this if we do it? So, or what happens if we do nothing? I mean, so I think that if we had an ordinance written that we could look at and say, okay, we think this is good, or it may be an overreach, or it may be an overreaction, or it may be, or it may be the perfect deal. It may be the best thing that we could possibly do, not only for the operation of us, but for the ratepayers and the citizens of Murfreesboro. So I think that would be advantageous to us to be able to look at something written down and say, okay, this is what we're talking about. Because right now we don't really, I think all of us have an opinion, but I don't think we have a consensus enough opinion to say this is something we need to vote on.
Yeah, that'll give us some time to get some of these answers and get some feedback or whatever. I mean, again, I'm still looking for some advantages of having it separate too. I mean, I think it's all important, so.
Is that enough guidance, Mr. Tindall? Any other questions? All right, move to beer permits.
Mayor, we have a couple sheets tonight. One is a special event application from St. Thomas Rutherford Foundation. They have several special events scheduled for September 17th around the square. And then at personal residences on August 22nd, November 7th, and there's 3 on November 7th, at 3 different residences. So that application is in order, and we would issue that permit upon your approval. The second one is a application for the new Kroger on Veterans Parkway. That one still lacks the final building codes inspections, but the rest of the application is in order, and once they pass those inspections, we would issue this permit at that time if you approve it tonight, and it is in order. Be glad to try to answer any questions.
Any questions about the beer permits? Any motion?
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion second. Ms. Wright?
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. I have one board and commission appointment that's just for a heads up to vote on the next meeting, but the application came in late. We have someone from Water and Sewer who is moving out of the city, and the expiration of his term is in June. So Brian Kidd has agreed to serve on the Water and Sewer Board. So if you'll think about that until the next meeting. Any statements?
Not tonight.
We have one item under other business. Mr. Lyons?
Thank you, Mayor. We've got one item for other business. In late March, City Council approved a contract with Bell Construction to be the construction manager at risk for the Police Department headquarter project. We have package number 1 for your consideration. The guaranteed maximum price is a little more than $8.3 million. This will cover the site utilities, concrete work, foundational masonry, structural steel, elevators, temporary power, and earthworks. We're bringing this piece forward now because we're now finishing up some of the finer points on the actual building. By moving forward on the utilities and the earthwork, we won't lose any time on the schedule. Project's scheduled to be done in December of 2017. While we're refining the building, it's really showed us the advantages and benefits of using the construction manager at risk. We've already identified $2 million worth of savings that will not impact the functionality of the building. So absolutely becoming a very fast believer that this is the way for us to deliver vertical construction projects. But it is my recommendation to approve package number 1 for you this evening.
I want to go on record as showing it shows final completion January 4th, 2018 on the schedule.
Okay.
So, not 17.
Pardon me?
Not 2017.
Okay.
All right.
We'll see.
Any questions?
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion is second.
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. Any other business to come before the City Council? Craig? All right, we'll stand adjourned.